Okay, so let's continue where we left off from the last video. We stopped right here where we were focusing on stage 3, looking at reliability and validity. Again, there are 4 phases within stage 3, and they look at the initial pilot investigation, assessment of reliability, responsiveness, and then presence of floor capacity and sealing effect. Within those stages, they also assessed the psychometric properties of those SROMs used and the number of subjects and the responses they provided. Table 1 is an overview of everything that you read on page 331. So, again, they're telling you what they did in each phase, and then they're describing to you on the right side what each of those outcome measures actually consist of. So the dash, just for an example, is an RSOM with 3 parts. The first section consists of instructions, the second contains the essential 30 items, and the third is an optional module for the assessment of sports and performing arts. A 1 to 5 Likert scale is used for each item with a subsequent score range of 30 to 150. This raw score is recalculated for expression on a 100-point scale by subtracting 30, then dividing by 1.2, and allows for up to 3 missing responses. Again, responses are the patient's answers to the items on that questionnaire. They also provide the same overview for the UEFSI, so you're aware of what each of those are. And then they continue on to explain what was done in each of those phases. Now, the page in itself describes to you what has happened, but the table is just a quick review of everything that was described. So the table is telling you there was a pilot test where they looked at test-retest reliability. There were 19 subjects or 19 patients in that trial, and there was a total of 38 responses recorded for those 19 patients. And they looked at this in the ULFI and they looked at it in the DASH, but it was not accessible for the UFS. They also did a main test, or another subgroup. So if you remember, let me go up. There was a preliminary study, so they did the initial pilot investigation of 19 subjects for preliminary assessment, and then they continued on to add another 120 subjects to provide a total of 176 responses. So there was a pilot test and there was a main test. And then that goes on to continue to add again, the number of patients, the number of responses, and if that information was collected from the ULFI, the DASH, and the UEFS. If you notice, some of this information was not collected from the UEFS. They also tested responsiveness and added additional patients for comparison. And they also provided the number of missing responses if patients were not able to adequately answer one of the items on that questionnaire, or if it was just an invalid response. So everything that you're reading here is just a quick review of all that was described on the page. And again, this is page 331. So if you're wondering what is table 1 talking about, it's telling you everything that they did for stage 3. Alright, let's keep going down to page 332. Actually, I'm going to continue from phase 1 of stage 3 at the very bottom of page 331. So, phase 1 of stage 3, the pilot investigation of the ULFI and the DASH was performed to determine a preliminary assessment of reliability. So they're testing for reliability. They looked at 14 subjects with 28 responses, and they also looked at responsiveness within 5 subjects and received 10 responses total. In addition, the capacity to measure floor response was determined in a test sample of asymptomatic normal subjects. The floor response is 0, the lowest possible score, while the ceiling response is 100. So they're also testing for ceiling effect or floor effect. Now, within each of these studies, a required sample size is needed to determine reliability. And they provide the equation for you in exactly how they came up with the exact sample size needed for each of these phases. For each of these phases. So they said the sample size required for reliability phase was determined by calculating the power of the sample using the Dawson and Trapp method, where required sample size is the number of patients equals the equation provided, which is the Dawson and Trapp method. So for each of the phases, a required sample size is needed. So they use the power of the sample to figure out what was the actual sample size needed to determine there was reliability. Okay? So they explain to you how they came up with that sample size. That's essentially what that is. They're telling you how they came up with the exact sample size. In phase 2 of stage 3, the assessments of test-retest reliability, and just so you know where I am, here. The assessment of test-retest reliability of the ULFI, DASH, and UEFS involved a subgroup of subjects, 32 total, who completed all 3 SROMs at baseline and then again after 48 hours. So, in phase 2 of stage 3, to test-retest reliability, they provided a total of 32 subjects, all 3 of the outcome measures. They gave them the DASH, they gave them the ULFI, and they also gave them the UEFS at baseline. So they gave it to them initially. And then 48 hours later, they gave them the exact same questionnaires again. No treatment was administered between the 2 data collection times. So nothing was done from the initial time that they gave the patient all 3 of the outcome measures till 48 hours later. They initially gave them the 3 outcome measures, and then 48 hours later, they gave them to them again without doing anything. Okay? A VAS of functional status was used to evaluate if any change occurred between the data collection days, with a permitted limit of either change equals 0 or 0 plus or minus 1 as the bounds of acceptance for inclusion. For the DASH and the ULFI, the data was combined with the pilot study for the final determination of test-retest reliability. So again, they're just telling you how they came up with their statistical values for test-retest reliability. Now in phase 3, looking down further here, the assessments of responsiveness and error were determined only for the ULFI and DASH using a subgroup of subjects, total of 24 subjects, who were retrospectively combined with those of the pilot, I have to go back up, study, to provide a pooled sample, so that now the new total sample is 29. The UEFS was not tested in this phase, as a test-retest reliability and construct validity indicated that the psychometric properties of the DASH were consistently more favorable, supporting previous upper extremity research. So, based on what they did, first and foremost, they were not able to test the UEFS at the test-retest reliability and construct validity. So I just kind of want to point out in table 1 for the type of data collected, they did initially say that for the UEFS, test-retest reliability was not looked at. Okay, so just kind of going back. So the going back down to page 332 here, after going back up to the chart on table 1 of page 331. The UEFS was not tested in this phase, as the test-retest reliability and construct validity indicated the psychometric properties of the DASH were consistently more favorable, supporting previous upper extremity SRM research. So based on literature that has already been published, the DASH was consistently more favorable. Responsiveness evaluation requires that some sort of change occurred and could be verified in some way that the patient score of any RSOM can be tested against that change to determine if a true response has occurred. In this study, the model proposed by Beaton et al. For the DASH was followed. So for responsiveness, they used the model proposed by Beaton et al., which is a different article provided, where the external inclusion criterion of the known group difference was natural healing times from the initial to final test periods. These natural times included baseline measures of upper limb status that were post-operative acute post-trauma with fracture of grade 2+ ligament sprain, or initial rehabilitation commencement with a VAS as the criterion measure for overall status. After the completion of the 68-week rehabilitation program, the subjects again completed the measures. In addition, the use of a distribution-based method was selected was the known and accepted minimal detectable change for the DASH of 10.7% being the criterion. So in order for a change to be considered statistically significant, it had to be a change of 10.7. So that's essentially what they're saying. And they continue on. They provide this information for you of exactly what they did in each phase to assess for different types of reliability, validity, and responses. And they tell you the total number of patients and exactly what was done. So they're just summarizing exactly how they tested the different types of reliability, responsiveness, and validity. Okay, we're going to stop the video here again, just because the next part that I want to kind of go back to is stats, and I want to make sure that there aren't any interruptions in this video. So I'm going to pause here, and then we're going to talk a little bit about some of the different types of stats that you're seeing within this section.